Got fired from my job after I joked that a crude drawing looked like a shet during our company retreat. Turns out it was made by the owner's disabled daughter, who everyone knew always submitted bad drawings, but nobody warned me. It was the kind of thing that seems trivial in hindsight, but at the time, it felt like the end of everything. How could something so small, something I'd said in passing, unravel my entire career in the blink of an eye? It all started 3 months ago when I walked into the office of a small, mid-sized company with big dreams. I was hired for a sales, advertising role, a position that I'd thought would offer me room to grow, to prove myself. I was still on, which meant I was just getting my feet wet. But I liked it. The next day, I liked the team, the atmosphere. There was this easygoing vibe. Everyone seemed laid back, as if we were all in on some big secret about how to get ahead. I was eager to be part of it. I had a plan. Start small, manage accounts, and eventually work my way up. It wasn't going to be easy, but nothing worth having ever is, right? And then, there was the retreat. Company retreats are supposed to be fun, right? The perfect blend of work and play. This was the big event of the year. And everyone from the satellite offices came to our main office for the weekend. I knew it would be a chance to bond with my coworkers outside of the usual office setting. But what I didn't know was that it'd be my downfall. Our boss, the owner of the company, wasn't exactly a hands-on leader. He was always in and out, managing different projects, setting up new offices. He was never really around when I started, but that all changed for the retreat. He showed up for the weekend, and I was told his daughter, Amy, would be there too. I didn't know much about Amy, only that she worked at one of the satellite offices and, as I was warned by a few coworkers, didn't have much to do. They told me to be nice, but honestly, I didn't think much of it. I'm always nice. It's not hard to be polite, especially when you're just trying to fit in at a new job. I had one brief interaction with her before the retreat's big event. I was getting coffee, and Amy was in front of me, struggling to get the condiments just right. I stepped in to help, as anyone would. She thanked me, but it wasn't just the usual politeness. It was a kind of gratitude that made me feel I'd done something more. She told me she hated coffee but had drink it because her dad made her. The way she said it, almost loudly, stuck with me. I smiled, gave her a quick reply, and handed her the cup. Important stuff, I said. Can't go without your coffee. She laughed, and I thought, that went well. I had no idea that would be the last decent interaction I'd heard, or that it would all spiral out of control so quickly. Most of the retreat was filled with the usual team, building exercises, icebreakers, puzzles, and casual bonding. Everyone was more or less in a good mood, and I felt like I was getting the hang of things. But the last event was the one that everyone was waiting for, the big showcase. We were assigned to come up with creative pitches for new clients. Each team had to create something: pictures, slogans, jingles, anything that could impress the owner. The catch was that our work would be critiqued in front of everyone, and if we made a strong enough impression, we could land a big account. I went for a jingle. It wasn't the most groundbreaking idea, but it fit with the brand. I rhymed a few words, recorded it on my phone, and played it for my team. We made a few improvements, and by the end of it, I was proud of the result. Silly, it worked. It wasn't a masterpiece, but I thought it was decent enough. When it was time for the critique, I felt a little nervous. The next day, I hadn't been at the company long enough to be confident in my place, but I pushed those nerves aside. I was about to present something that I'd worked on, and I knew this could be my chance to shine. Then the owner started going through the submissions, one by one. People were laughing, offering feedback, and giving the usual comments. Nothing out of the ordinary. But when my jingle came up, the room fell silent. There were a few chuckles, a couple of awkward comments, but overall it felt off. Well, At least my jingle was better than that. Did a 3-year-old draw it? I said, trying to lighten the mood with a joke. Immediately, the room went dead silent. I froze. I thought it was funny. But no one else did. The owner gave me a sharp look, then said, "If you don't have anything nice to say, keep it to yourself." I looked around, my heart sinking. My face burned with the realization that something was very wrong. Then I noticed Amy, sitting in the back, her face flushed, tears starting to form in her eyes. My mind raced. I hadn't considered that the crude drawing on the screen could have been hers. It didn't even cross my mind. Nobody had warned me about her drawings, about the unspoken rule of pretending they were fine when everyone knew they were. And just like that, I was pulled out of the retreat. My day, my career, came crashing down with a single comment. And I had no idea how to fix it. SAC word count, 600 target, 600 costs. The moment the words left my mouth, I knew I'd said something wrong. But it wasn't until the silence hit that the weight, my mistake, sank in. I could feel the room's energy shift from lighthearted to tense in an instant. I wasn't the type of person who made people uncomfortable on purpose, but here I was, everyone looking at me like I'd just kicked puppy. I didn't even know why. The owner cleared his throat and shot me a look that could freeze fire. "If you don't have anything nice to say, keep it to yourself," he said, his voice sharp, cutting through the awkward tension. I sat there, trying to process what had just happened. I had made a joke. Everyone else had laughed. I mean, what was the big deal? It was harmless, right? I looked around the room, but nobody was even smiling anymore. It was like I was the only one who had missed the memo on what was acceptable in this company. I glanced over at Amy, sitting in the back. She was looking down at her lap, her face red, her hands trembling as she wiped away a tear. That was when it hit me, the drawing. The one I'd mocked. The one I thought looked like a bad attempt at art from a kid. That drawing had been Amy's. I froze, my stomach sinking. How had I not put that together sooner? I hadn't thought for a second that the drawing might have been hers. No one had said anything about it being hers. No one had even hinted that it might be. In my defense, nobody had warned me about her, about the drawing she always submitted at these retreats. My mind was racing, trying to process everything all at once. I wanted to apologize, but the moment felt like it had slipped away already. The damage had been done. The owner didn't say anything else. He simply nodded for me to pack up and leave. I grabbed my things in a daze, still trying to understand what had just happened. I could feel the eyes on me as I walked out of the conference room, my heart pounding in my chest. When I got back to my desk, I sat there for a moment, staring at the screen in front of me, completely numb. I kept replaying the scene over and over in my mind. What had I done? I had just ruined my chances at the company, at a job I had worked so hard to get. I heard a voice from behind me. "Mike, can I talk to you for a minute?" It was my boss. He was standing in the doorway of my office, his face unreadable. "Sure," I said, forcing a smile even though my stomach was doing flips. The next day, I followed him down the hallway to his office, trying to make sense of the situation. But all I could hear was the pounding in my ears. When I entered his office, he didn't waste any time. "Mike," he started, "I've decided to let you go." My heart stopped. I blinked, unable to process what he was saying. "What? Why?" "It's not a good fit," his voice flat. "You're still on orientation, and I just don't think this is going to work out." But my performance, everyone said I was doing well. "I've had great feedback." "What do you mean?" I stammered, my voice thick with confusion. He leaned back in his chair, clearly uncomfortable. "It's just not the right fit. You've made some good progress, but, well, it's better to let you go now." I was still trying to wrap my mind around it. It didn't make sense. How could one joke, one stupid comment, cost me my job? Before I could say anything else, I heard footsteps outside the door. Then, security walked in, looking at me like I was a criminal. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what was happening. They handed me a box to pack up my things. My head was spinning. Everything I'd worked for, everything I'd been excited about, had just come crashing down. I didn't even have time to process it before they were escorting me out of the building. As I walked to the exit, I saw a few of my coworkers, their eyes avoiding mine. Nobody said a word. Outside, the air felt colder than usual, like the world had somehow turned on me in the span of a few minutes. I had no idea how I was supposed to explain this. I lost my job because I made it a joke about a drawing. Didn't exactly sound like the kind of story that would get you hired again anytime soon. As I stepped onto the sidewalk, I tried to clear my head, but the thoughts kept swirling. How had this happened? Why hadn't anyone warned me about Amy and her drawings? Was I just supposed to know? I felt the sting of humiliation creeping in, but there was no time to dwell on it. I had to figure out what came next. The rest of the weekend was a blur. I couldn't stop thinking about the retreat, about what I had said about Amy. I felt awful for her, for making her feel bad, for not understanding the situation. It wasn't until later that night, when I got a call from one of my former teammates, that I started to get some answers. "Hey Mike, want to come grab a drink? We all need it after that retreat," she said, her voice carrying a hint of regret. I wasn't sure if I was ready to face anyone yet, but I need to understand what had happened. I needed to know why no one had warned me. So, I agreed. But the moment I walked into the bar, I got my first real clue about what had been going on. "Mike, we're really sorry," my teammate said. "Webby should have told you about Amy. She always submits those kinds of drawings. We didn't think it'd be an issue." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "You knew?" "Yeah," she said, looking guilty. "Everyone knows. It's just something we deal with the retreats. We don't make a big deal about it because it's her thing." I felt the anger rise in me, mixing with the shame. Why hadn't anyone warned me? Why hadn't anyone told me about the unspoken rule of just pretending it was fine? I wanted to scream, but instead I just nodded, not sure how to react. The conversation shifted to lighter topics, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been blindsided by something I never saw coming. I should have known. But I didn't. Next day, you word count 800 target. I stood in the hallway outside my boss's office, the reality, what had just happened, hitting me like a punch to the gut. The words, "You're fired," still echoed in my ears, and my mind kept replaying the moment I'd been told to pack up and leave. I felt like I was walking through a fog, unable to grasp the enormity of it all. I didn't even get a chance to defend myself. There was no explanation, no chance to explain my side, no way to show that I hadn't meant to offend anyone. It all felt so unfair. Unfair. But what could I do? My boss had already made up his mind. I walked back to my desk, feeling the eyes of my coworkers on me as I passed by. The tension in the air was thick, and no one said a word. It was like I had become invisible, as though I was no longer part of the team. I gathered my things slowly, my hands shaking as I shoved papers into a box. I kept thinking about Amy, about how I had made fun of her drawing without knowing it was hers. The guilt gnawed at me. How could I have been so careless? Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a message from one of my teammates. "Hey, I know you're probably feeling terrible right now, but just know you weren't the only one who felt awkward during that whole thing." I stared at the message, trying to make sense of it. Why was she apologizing? What did she mean? Was there something I didn't know? I didn't have the energy to reply. Instead, I grabbed the box with my things and walked out of the office. Outside, the cold air hit me hard, like a slap across the face. I had no idea where I was going, but I couldn't stay in that building any longer. The entire walk home, I kept replaying everything that had happened. I hadn't even realized the gravity of the situation until it was too late. A Joe mistake. How could something so small have such big consequences? I spent the rest of the evening in a haze. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I couldn't bear the thought of explaining what had happened. I barely slept that night, my mind racing with questions I didn't have answers to. The next day, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call from one of the senior account managers. "Mike, I just wanted to check in," he said. "I feel bad about what happened. You didn't deserve that." His voice was kind, but it didn't make me feel any better. If anything, it just reminded me how isolated I was now. The words from my boss still stung. Not a good fit. That's what he'd said. What did that even mean? How had my work performance been up until that point? Everything had been fine. I'd gotten positive feedback, I'd been working hard, and then bam. One offhand comment. And I was out the door. I thanked the senior account manager for calling, but I wasn't in the mood for sympathy. I had bigger problems to deal with, like how to explain this mess to a future employer. It was a week before I got the nerve to reach out to anyone from the retreat. I needed answers. Needed to know why no one had told me about Amy's drawings. It wasn't just about losing my job anymore. It was about the complete lack of communication. How could they have let me walk into that situation without a heads up? I called one of my teammates, the one who had messaged me the day before. "Hey," I said, my voice still heavy from the weight of everything. "What's going on with Amy? Why didn't anyone tell me about her drawings?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Look, I know this is tough, but it's just the way it is with Amy. We don't make a big deal about it. We just kind of go along with it because it's her thing." Her thing. The words felt so hollow, like they were brushing aside the real issue. "You should have told me," I said, my frustration rising. I walked into that situation blind. No one warned me. "I know," she said. "I'm sorry. But you've got to understand, it's not something we really talk about. We just try to ignore it. It's easier that way." "Easier who?" "I didn't know," I said, my voice quiet now. "I didn't know it was hers. I didn't know I was making fun of her work. I thought I was just being funny." "You weren't the only one who made a joke about it," she said, almost as if it were supposed to make me feel better. "But it's always been like this. We all know it's bad, but we don't say anything." I didn't know what to say to that. I couldn't process it. I didn't even want to. "So what now?" I asked, my voice small. "I don't know, Mike. I really don't," she said, sounding genuinely regretful. "But if you want, we're all still here for you. We just didn't know how to warn you without making things worse." I didn't have the heart to argue. It wasn't their fault I'd screwed up, but it felt like they could have done more to prevent it from happening. After the call, I sat down and stared at my phone for what felt like hours. The reality of what had happened was slowly settling in. It wasn't just about the firing anymore. It was about a complete breakdown in communication, a failure to warn someone about something so obvious. And worse, the deeper I dug, the more I realized that Amy wasn't just a joke to everyone at the company. She was a person, someone with real struggles, someone who had been treated like a child by the people who were supposed to care about her the most. I couldn't fix that. I couldn't change the past. But somehow I had to find a way to move forward, to learn from my mistake. And it started with understanding Amy, not as the owner's daughter or a source of awkward moments at retreats, but as a person. Take word count 900 target 900. The next few days felt like a blur. I couldn't stop thinking about everything that happened, but no matter how much I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling of being completely blindsided. The confusion lingered, settling in my chest, like a weight I couldn't get rid of. Why hadn't anyone warned me? I spent the weekend replaying the entire retreat in my mind. The moment I made that joke about the drawing, it felt like the walls around me were closing in. What was supposed to be a lighted moment of camaraderie had turned into a career-ending mistake. Monday morning rolled around, and I was still in a fog. I couldn't focus on anything. My thoughts kept drifting back to Amy and what I'd said. I couldn't stop feeling awful for her. I'd made a joke about her work without even thinking. It was such a stupid thing to do. But as the days dragged on, something started to change. I couldn't keep wallowing in my guilt forever. I needed to do something. I needed to take responsibility for what had happened, not just for my own sake, but for Amy's too. That's when I decided to reach out. It wasn't just about my job anymore. It wasn't even just about me being fired. It was about doing what I could to make things right. To show that I wasn't the kind of person who could brush off something like this without a second thought. I opened up my laptop and stared at the screen for what felt like hours. What was I supposed to say? How do you apologize for something like this? Finally, I sent her a message. Amy, I don't know what to say. I've been thinking a lot about what happened, and I just want to say I'm really sorry. I should never have made that joke. I didn't know it was your drawing, and I feel terrible that I hurt you. I hope you can forgive me. I wasn't sure what kind of response I was expecting, but I didn't think it would be this one. A few hours later, my phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Amy. Hi, Mike. I just want to thank you for your message. I've been upset about what happened too, but I understand that it wasn't intentional. It's just hard sometimes. I didn't know how to say anything, but I'm glad you reached out. Reading those words felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders. I wasn't expecting her to forgive me so easily, but it felt like a step in the right direction. We exchanged a few more messages, and I learned a lot about Amy that I hadn't known before. She told me about her struggles growing up, how difficult it had been for her to communicate, and how people often misunderstood her. I've been dealing with this for a long time, she wrote. Sometimes it feels like no one sees me for who I really am. They just see the disability and treat me like I'm a kid. It's hard. I felt a lump form in my throat as I read her words. I had no idea what she had been through. I had no idea how much her disability affected every part of her life. I'm really sorry for making you feel that way. I typed back. I never meant to hurt you, and I realize now how thoughtless I was. I want to be better. And I want to understand more about what you go through. She didn't respond right away, and I wasn't sure if I had said the right thing. I waited, staring at the screen, feeling the weight of my apology hanging in the air. A few hours later, I got another message. Thank you for saying that. It means a lot. Honestly, most people don't even care enough to understand. But you're different. It's just hard when everyone treats me like I'm some kind of joke. But I know you didn't mean it that way. I felt a pang of guilt at her words. How many times had I laughed along with the jokes, not realizing how much they hurt? I had been part of the problem without even knowing it. Do you want to talk sometime? She asked, her message a little slower than the others, as if she was unsure. I like talking to you. You're the first person who's ever really wanted to understand. I didn't even have to think about it. Yeah, I'd really like that, I replied. The next day. Whenever you're ready. It felt like a turning point. I had been so wrapped up in my own mistake, my own embarrassment, that I hadn't taken the time to see what Amy was really dealing with. This wasn't just about me losing my job. It was about her feeling isolated, misunderstood, and constantly overlooked. The more we talked, the more I realized how much I had to learn. Amy wasn't just some pitied figure. She was a person with real thoughts, feelings, and experiences. I had no right to make light of that. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't going to let this situation define me or her. I couldn't change what had happened, but I could change how I moved forward. I could make things right, and I could be better. I spent the rest of the night texting back and forth with Amy, talking about everything from work to the latest TV shows. It wasn't just about apologizing anymore. It was about building something real. A friendship, perhaps, but more importantly, understanding. By the end of the conversation, I felt like I'd taken the first step toward redemption. I wasn't sure where this would go, but I knew one thing for certain: I was going to do better by Amy. I just hoped it wouldn't be too late. It's word count 702 target 700 taux. The next few days after I sent Amy that message felt like a whirlwind. I had no idea what to expect, but I wasn't prepared for the emotional weight of our conversation. It was more than I had anticipated, more than I could have asked for, and it made me realize just how much I had been blind to. It wasn't just that I had messed up with her drawing. It was the way I had seen her, or rather, the way I hadn't seen her. I had always thought of Amy as the owner's daughter. Someone who would just be there, maybe a little awkward, maybe a little out of place in the professional environment, but I never stopped to think about the person she really was. The more Amy and I messaged, the more I understood the layers of complexity in her life. I couldn't help but feel guilty about how I had reacted during the retreat. I had been so quick to make a joke, to mock her drawing, without considering that her disability might made that moment far more personal for her than it would have been for anyone else. One night, as we were messaging again, Amy opened up about her life. "I've never really told anyone this," she typed slowly, "but I've been struggling with my disability for as long as I can remember. It's hard when people don't take me seriously." I could hear the unspoken weight in her words, even though we were just texting. She was trying to be brave, but I could tell it was a struggle for her. "That must be really tough," I replied, my words feeling small in comparison to everything she had been through. "I didn't realize how much it affects you," she responded almost immediately. "Most people don't. It's easier if I just don't talk about it. But when people laugh at me or treat me like a joke, it hurts. I know I'm different, but it's like no one really sees me." Reading that, I felt a lump form in my throat. I had no idea she was carrying so much pain behind those few awkward moments I had witnessed. I was just seeing the surface, the discomfort she felt when trying to communicate, the way she was treated like a child. But this, her reality, was deeper than anything I had imagined. "I'm really sorry, Amy," I typed, trying to express something that felt impossible to put into words. "I never meant to make you feel like that. I didn't know what you were going through." "You couldn't have known," she replied. "And it's not your fault. But when it happens over and over again, it gets harder to take. People assume things about me all the time, and they treat me like I'm incapable of doing anything. But that's not who I am." I didn't know what to say next. I wanted to fix everything, but I knew I couldn't. I couldn't erase the past, couldn't undo my mistake, but I could listen. I could be here for her, even if it was just in this moment. "I understand now," I said. "And I want to be someone you can talk to. If you ever need someone to listen, I'm here." For a while, there was only silence on the other end. I wasn't sure if I had said the right thing, but then she replied, "Thank you. I don't have a lot of people who understand. Most just treat me like a burden, or they avoid me altogether. But you're different." Her words hit me hard. I hadn't expected her to say that. It felt strange, almost surreal, to be the person she could rely on after everything I had done. I thought about the retreat, about the way I had made that joke, about how easy it had been to laugh at something I didn't understand. I had acted without thinking, without considering the impact it would have on Amy, or anyone else for that matter. "I really wish I could change how things went," I said, my voice softer than before, "but I can't. All I can do now is learn and be better." Amy's reply was simple, but it was enough. "That's all anyone can do," she said. From that point on, things started to shift. Our conversations grew deeper, more meaningful. We talked about everything from work to life to the TV shows we were watching. It wasn't just about the apology anymore. It was about a real connection. And, though I still felt guilt over what had happened, it was starting to fade, replaced by a sense of hope. One night, after an especially long chat, Amy surprised me by asking, do you want to talk about House of the Dragon after I finish the next episode? It was such a simple question, but it meant everything. We were talking like friends now, no longer about my mistake, but about shared experiences. Yeah, I'd love to, I replied, a smile creeping into my voice. And just like that, it felt like we had crossed some invisible line. From awkward acquaintances to real friends. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy for either of us. Amy had her own battles to fight, and I had my own to deal with. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was standing alone. It wasn't about the job anymore. It was about being the kind of person who could make things right, even if it took time. And for Amy, it was about finding someone who could see her for who she truly was. As I lay in bed nights at the ceiling, I realized that maybe losing my job hadn't been the worst thing that had happened. Maybe it was just the push I needed to open my eyes and see things differently. I wasn't sure what the future held for me, but at least now, I felt like I was moving the right direction. East word count 1500 feet target if feet tunture. The more Amy and I talked, the more I realized how much I had been missing all along. It wasn't just about my job anymore. It was about understanding Amy, seeing her for who she really was, not just the caricature I had created in my mind. We messaged every day. It started off slow, just checking in with each other, but then the conversations deepened. It was as if I had stumbled into a world I had never fully understood. One where Amy was a person, a complicated, interesting person. Not just a figure to be pitied or avoided. She told me more about her life, about her struggle to communicate, how people assumed she was mentally challenged because of her disability. She even told me about her father's constant overprotection, the way he tried to control every aspect of her life. He means well, I guess. She typed one night, but it's hard. I don't know what it's like to be free. Her words struck me harder than I expected. The next day, it dawned on me just how much she had been living in the shadow of her father's expectations, and how little room she had to just be herself. She talked about her childhood, how her mom had passed away in a car accident when she was young, and how she had never quite felt like she belonged after that. She had fought her whole life to overcome the challenges her brain injury had left her with, only to be reduced to a burden by the people around her. People don't see me, Mike, she wrote. They see what they want to see. They don't see the person who tries every day to get better, to be more than what they think I am. I read her message over and over. How could I have been so blind? How could I have made that joke? Not realizing that Amy's reality was so different from what I thought. It wasn't just a drawing. It was a reflection of her attempts to express herself, to be creative in a world that didn't allow her the same space as others. And I had laughed. I'd mocked her. I felt ashamed of myself. I had missed the bigger picture, and it had cost me more than a job. It had cost me my dignity, and it had hurt someone I was just starting to get to know. But as the days passed, I started to see things in a new light. Our conversations became more than just a way for me to apologize or redeem myself. They became a way for both of us to understand each other better. I was learning about Amy's struggles, but she was also learning about me. One evening, after another long chat, Amy sent me a message that made me stop in my tracks. I know this sounds weird, she typed, but I've been thinking. Maybe you could come visit me at my office sometime. I know it's a little out of the blue, but it might be nice to hang out. No pressure or anything. I stared at the message, unsure of what to make of it. Was she really asking me to come see her? After everything that had happened, I quickly replied, "I'd love to. When would be a good time?" The idea of actually meeting Amy in person felt surreal. It wasn't just about her being the owner's daughter anymore. It was about me seeing her as a person, a real person with her own hopes, dreams, and flaws. Over the next week, we made plans. I was nervous, unsure of how things would go. Would it be awkward? Would she still want to talk to me after everything I had said? When the day finally arrived, I showed up at the satellite office where Amy worked. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but when I walked in, I was immediately struck by how quiet it was. The office felt empty, save for a few workers who were buried in their own tasks. Amy was at her desk, her back to me as she worked. I hesitated for a moment, then walked over to her. "Hey," I said softly, and she turned around, her eyes lighting up when she saw me. "Oh, you actually came," she said, her voice warm and genuine. "I wouldn't have missed it," I replied, smiling. She motioned for me to sit, and I pulled up a chair across from her. We started talking about the usual things, work, how her day had been. But there was something different this time. There was an ease between us, like the tension had finally lifted. As we chatted, I noticed something I hadn't before. Amy was actually good at what she did. She didn't just sit there, being taken care of. She worked hard, even though it took her longer than others. Her desk was organized, and she knew every detail of her tasks. It wasn't easy for her, but she did it. And I hadn't seen that before. "So, what's next for you?" I asked, after a long pause. She looked at me, a little surprised by the question. "Well, I don't know. I want to do more than just sit behind a desk all day. But I don't really know how to make that happen." I leaned forward. "You're capable of a lot more than people give you credit for. I've seen it now." She smiled, a soft, genuine smile that made me realize how much she appreciated hearing those words. "You really mean that?" she asked, her voice a little quieter. "I do," I said, without hesitation. "You're not a burden. You're more than capable. You just need people who see you for who you really are." Amy. It didn't respond right away. She just looked at me, her eyes softening as she took in my words. For the first time since I had met her, I felt like I was really seeing Amy, not just as the owner's daughter or someone I had unknowingly hurt, but as a person with real potential, real dreams, and real strength. And it was the moment I realized that our friendship, this new bond we were forming, was about more than just fixing my mistake. It was about truly understanding each other, breaking down the walls that had been built up between us, and helping each other move forward. I didn't know what would happen next, but for the first time, in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be. Word count 1500, target 20 Havensu. The following weeks felt like a slow, unfolding story, one that was no longer centered on my job or the retreat. It was about something else now. Amy and I had built something real between us, and it wasn't just about an apology anymore. It was about friendship, about getting to know each other in ways I hadn't expected, and understanding that people, especially those we tend to overlook, have far more depth than we give them credit for. I started visiting Amy at her office regularly. It wasn't much at first, just casual visits during lunch breaks, small chats about work or what we were watching on TV, but it grew. It was as if those visits were the foundation of something I didn't even know I needed. We talked about everything: her frustrations with her father's overprotectiveness, her desire to be seen as more than just the daughter of the company owner, the things she wanted to do but couldn't. "I used to want to go to college," she told me one afternoon, her eyes distant. "I thought maybe I could get a degree, do something that mattered. But my dad doesn't think it's a good idea. He's always had a plan for me, a plan I never really got a say in." Hearing that stung more than I expected. I had never considered how much control her father had over her life, how much of her identity had been shaped by his decisions. I had assumed Amy had everything handed to her, that she was just, well, the owner's daughter, but she wasn't. She was so much more than that. You deserve to make your own choices, I said, trying to offer her some kind of comfort, though I knew it wasn't enough. You deserve a life that's your own, not one that's decided for you. And I know, she replied, a quiet sadness in her voice. But I don't know how to do that. How do you even begin when every has been decided for you your whole life? I didn't have the answers. I still didn't know much about the world Amy lived in, but I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't going to let her feel invisible anymore. Our friendship deepened. Slowly, the next day, I began to see her for who she truly was, someone who fought every day to prove herself, even though deep would even realize it. Amy worked harder than anyone I knew, even though it took her longer to get things done. She wasn't lazy, she was determined. But the world only saw her disability, never the quiet strength she carried with her. I was learning how much I had missed, how much I had taken for granted. One afternoon, after a long day at her office, Amy asked me a question that I hadn't expected. "Mike," she began, hesitating for a moment, "do you think I'll ever be able to do something more than this? More than just working at the satellite office, doing busy work all day?" The question hit me harder than I thought it would. The next day, Amy had spent her life believing that her worth was tied to what others thought of her, that her disability defined her. But I knew that wasn't true. She wasn't just the sum of her limitations. She had dreams, ideas, a mind that was capable of so much more. "Amy," I said, leaning forward, "you're already doing something more than most people ever will. You just haven't had the chance to show it yet. But I believe in you. I always have." Her eyes softened at my words, and for the first time, I saw her smile not out of politeness or obligation, but because she truly appreciated what I was saying. Later that week, Amy told me that she had started taking small steps toward changing things for herself. She had begun looking into online courses, things she could study at her own pace, things she wanted to learn, not things that were chosen for her. "I don't know where this will lead," she said, "but I feel like it's a start." The next day, "It's something for me, you know." I couldn't help but smile. She was starting to reclaim her life, and it wasn't about her father's plans for her anymore. It was about her choosing her own path, no matter how small the steps were. In the weeks that followed, we continued to support each other. I found myself more and more invested in her progress, not just as a friend, but as someone who had seen her grow in ways she couldn't see herself. And she was right there with me, encouraging me to keep moving forward, to not let the past define me either. It wasn't all smooth sailing. I still had my moments of doubt, especially when it came explaining my firing to future employers. I didn't know how to frame it. I was fired for making a joke about my boss's daughter. It sounded ridiculous. But Amy helped me through it. She reminded me that mistakes don't have to define us, that we can always find a way to grow from them. And that kept moving forward, keeping my head high, knowing that no matter how tough it got, I had learned more than I could have imagined. One night, after a long conversation about the future, Amy sent me a message that I'll never forget. "I'm so glad we became friends," she wrote. "You're the only person who has ever really seen me. Not as the owner's daughter, but as me." Reading that, I realized just how far we had come. Not just as friends, but as people who had finally started to break down the walls we'd both been hiding behind. Amy had started to see herself as more than just a label, and I had started to see her as she was, not as the person I had assumed she was. And in doing so, I had finally started to see myself more clearly too. We weren't done yet, but we were on our way. And word count counter target or 1500,000 choose. It's funny how life can turn around in ways you never expect. A few months ago, I was sitting at a desk, thinking I had everything under control, thinking my career was on track. Then, in an instant, it all fell apart over one stupid joke. I had lost my job, my confidence, and I thought I had lost any chance of ever moving forward. But the truth is, that moment of failure didn't define me. It didn't define Amy either. We both had our mistakes, our insecurities, but those things didn't mean we couldn't grow, learn, and rebuild. The next day, by the time I was ready to move on from the whole experience, things had changed for both of us. Amy had started taking those online courses she'd talked about. It wasn't easy for her, nothing ever was, but she was determined. She had a spark in her now. Something I hadn't seen when I first met her. And I wasn't standing still either. I had spent so much time worrying about what I had lost, about how I would explain the firing to future employers. But over the last few weeks, I realized something important. It wasn't about the job I lost. It was about the person I was becoming. I had learned more from Amy than I could have imagined. The next day, not just about patience or resilience, but about how to face your mistakes, own up to them, and move forward. I wasn't the same person who had joked about her drawing, not by a long shot. I had finally learned that true growth only happens when you're willing to see things from someone else's perspective. A few days after Amy had started her courses, I called her. I had been thinking a lot about my next step. It was time to stop dwelling on the past and start looking forward. "Hey, Amy," I said when she picked up, "how's the studying going?" She laughed, and I could hear the enthusiasm in her voice. "It's tough, but I'm actually enjoying it. I'm learning new things every day." I smiled, feeling a rush of pride for her. "That's awesome. I knew you could do it." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then she spoke again, her voice softer. "Mike, I just want to thank you for everything. For being there for me, for helping me see that I can do more than what people expect of me." I didn't know what to say at first. Amy had come so far, and I was still processing how much I had learned from her. "I'm the one who should be thanking you," I replied. "You taught me more than I ever thought I'd learn from a job loss." She chuckled softly. "Well, we've both learned a lot, haven't we?" I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Yeah, we've learned that we don't have to stay stuck in the past. We can move forward, no matter what's happened." That night, I sat down at my desk and started updating my resume, but this time, I didn't feel the same sense of dread I had before. I was no longer ashamed of what had happened. I was finally seeing it as part of the bigger picture. Something that had pushed me to grow, to become someone who understood the importance of empathy, of listening, and of owning my mistakes. A week later, I got a call for an interview. It was a small marketing firm looking for someone with a fresh perspective. It wasn't a huge step up from where I had been, but it was a chance to start over. The day before the interview, I texted Amy. "Wish me luck tomorrow." I wrote, "I've got an interview, and I'm feeling pretty good about it." She replied almost immediately. "You've got this, Mike. Just be yourself. That's all you need to be." I smiled at her words, feeling more confident than I had in a long time. She was right. I had spent so long trying to be someone else, trying to fit into a mold that wasn't mine. But now, I was going to be myself, mistakes and all. The interview went well. They asked me about my previous experience, and when it came time to explain why I left my last job, I didn't shy away from it. I told them the truth about my mistake and how it led to my firing. But I also told them how I had used that experience to grow, to become someone who was more aware of the impact I had on others. A few days later, they called me back with an offer. I had a new job, and it was a fresh start. As I sat in the new office on my first day, looking around at the unfamiliar faces, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. I had made it through the worst, and I had come out the other side better for it. But the best part, I had someone to share this new beginning with. Amy and I weren't just colleagues or acquaintances anymore. We were friends, real friends. A few weeks after I started my new job, I got a message from Amy. She had finished her first online course and was excited to start another. I'm finally doing it, she said. I'm taking control of my life. I couldn't have been prouder of her. I always knew you could, I replied. In that moment, I realized that the journey we had both been on had led us somewhere better than we could have imagined. We weren't just moving forward in our careers, we were moving forward in our lives, ready to face whatever came next. And that was all I could ask for. Is word count target 700?